Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, I am so excited about tonight. We are talking with Dr. Louis Markos about this book right here. Just hit the shelves Tuesday where all the best books are sold. Check it out. But this is From Aristotle to Christ, How Aristotelian Thought Clarified the Christian Faith. And I just could not be, I wanted to start with just a quick story tonight as some of you guys are still logging on. But I was reading on page 126 where Aristotle was talking about passion is something reckoned as courage. Those who act from passion like wild beasts rushing at those who have wounded them are thought to be brave, because brave men are also passionate. For passion above all things is eager to rush on danger. And what's hilarious about this idea of passion, I think, is that we often think of passion as bravery, as Aristotle said, and so what this is clearly talking about is something that I was reminded of when I was in Uganda for the first time, and I was there. The first night I was there, I heard some monkeys or something in the forest, and I go out looking in the forest for seeing what I can find. And then when I came back, all these guys called me the brave Mzungu, which means brave white person. And I felt like the Lord was saying to me, like, ask these guys what this is all about. And they said, well, that forest is covered up with poisonous snakes at night. And I'm like, oh, but they thought I was brave because I was stupid. But I was just passionate about trying to find these monkeys, and it did not work. So I need to click on my interview screen. I just realized that I need to add Dr. Markos to the camera here, to the screen. So let's get him on here. There we go. Dr. Markos, he is live. There he is. So we are looking forward to talking about this tonight, Aristotle to Christ. We were supposed to shoot this yesterday, but I had all kinds of technical difficulties, and because I love you guys and I love Dr. Markos, I spent all day reprogramming all my software so we could do this tonight. So we are ready to go. Dr. Markos, you wrote a book called Aristotle to Christ. Tell us why.
Oh my gosh. Well, about 3 years ago, I published a book called From Plato to Christ. Actually, 15 years before that was From Achilles to Christ. This is the end of a trilogy. And when I wrote From Achilles to Christ, I said in the preface, someday I need to do a specific book on Plato. And it took me over 10 years to get to it. But after doing Plato, I knew in my heart I would have to do Aristotle. Samuel Coleridge, the famous romantic poet, the guy who wrote Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, he said, everyone is either a Platonist or an Aristotelian. Now, I am more a Platonist. I've always loved Aristotle because of his poetics. Tells us what epic is and what tragedy is. And I knew a bit about his ethics, but I was always, like C.S. Lewis, more of a Platonist. But if you read Lewis carefully, you'll see he also loved Aristotle and quotes him quite a bit, especially on the subject of ethics. So I challenged myself and I said, I need to write From Aristotle to Christ. So I spent a whole year. A lot of it was rereading. Some was reading for the first time, reading all the secondary material, and said, I've got to figure out how to do this. And it was a big thing to bite off, because Aristotle is very complex, a little bit harder to understand, I think, than Plato. But I knew it had to be done. And I'm pleased, and I've worked with my editor to make it as understandable as possible, because a lot of this stuff is difficult. And so we added all the subheadings. I took out even more jargon. There was very little to begin with. I took out even more jargon. But we need to understand this, and especially now, Bill, people will talk about it. One of those things that's even more relevant and more necessary in the church today.
Well, as you said in the beginning of it, too, there's a glossary in the back of the book that you can turn to if you get lost in some of these words. But to me, though, it was pretty clear. My master's degree was in cultural apologetics with a graduate certificate in philosophical apologetics, but we didn't read a whole lot of Aristotle because we weren't really an Aristotelian program. That's Southern Evangelical Seminary certainly is. They're Thomists. So, that's, kind of in that vein. But But yeah, it's for me though, having not read a ton of Aristotle, not made it all the way through Nicomachean Ethics, for example, and things. This book was very accessible. I thought it really was. It's a good Christian introduction to Aristotelian thought for sure. If you're reading from a Christian perspective, for sure, or really any perspective, because it really is. It dialogues back and forth all over the place. With
See, people don't understand that one of the reasons Aristotle is often harder than Plato and seemingly less imaginative is that we don't have any books that Aristotle wrote. To use a modern analogy, what we have is as if I gave a bunch of lectures with a PowerPoint and then I died and my students assembled my PowerPoint, so to speak, and stitched them together. That's why there's never as many illustrations and examples as you would like to have, because we're getting the essence of it. So it's kind of like
yeah,
working your way through a logical proof. You need to follow each step or you'll fall behind.
yeah, and I'm certainly much more of a Platonist like you as than I am, an Aristotelian when it comes to my philosophy. But when you're discussing this stuff, you said you said very plainly that is make sure I said no true lover of Plato could write an equally celebratory book about Aristotle. That is not to say I've been converted to Aristotelianism. So you've not converted, but can
Not
you
converted,
explain?
but we need him.
Yeah,
We need him.
he.
Yeah.
I was going to say in the history of ideas, in case people are just coming from this for the first time, Aristotle was actually a student of Plato.
Right.
So you would think like this guy being Plato's student, they wouldn't have so much dichotomy, but they did. Like, so what are some of the
They did. Now, Plato is the single greatest influence in Aristotle. There's no doubt about that. He worked with him, he helped him, all that sort of stuff. Then he
yeah,
started his own university, if you will. And what's very important to me as I wrote this book is too often we simplify and say Plato took us up to the heavens and Aristotle brought us down to earth. Now it is true that Aristotle is a bit more practical, but that doesn't mean he is a materialist or a utilitarian or a
right,
relativist or an anti-essentialist, what people want to make him into. He is not at
right,
all. He believes in truth. The truth
hmm,
conversation is what he was part of. There is
yeah,
the good, there is the true, there is the beautiful. He thought about it in a different way. Rather than thinking about reality as an up down affair, as Plato did, he thought of it as an inside to the outside. And you have to understand the same relativists that would break down Plato and say there are no forms are the same people that always want to decenter, take what's at the center and throw it out to the margin. And that's what we're seeing. This what we're seeing today with this crazy tyranny of the minority. So again, Aristotle believes everything has a telos or a telos,
yeah,
Telos, a purposeful end, an essence that we have to
sure.
understand. It is not anything goes as the modern relevant and postmodernists believe.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about this telos idea over and over and over again because it shows up in the book so much. It would be doing a discredit to this book, like disservice to this book, if we didn't talk about that telos and logos as well. And and both of those things just simply defined just mean telos is like the end. It is the completed like the reason for which something is made. And logos is very similar. And I'm gonna ask you this here in just a second. I've always been perplexed why C.S. Lewis chose the Tao at the end of
Yeah,
Abolition of Man, and
Melissa Man.
why not logos?
Yeah,
Because logos is
I
a
mean,
biblical term. It means the
it
same
is.
thing.
It is.
But
I mean, it's
logos
pretty
is like
clear.
the
Yeah,
yeah the
it is.
logos is something, just to explain for our audience very quickly, is something that had a development of ideas through the pre-Socratic philosophers, Socratic
Right.
philosophers, the Jewish thinkers, and there's really an argument out there to be made that it could have even made its way into Islam, depending on where the sources would have came from.
Good.
But when it comes to Jesus being called the Word of Allah, because we see that Greek word logos in John chapter 1, as beginning in the beginning is the word, which is logos, which is the truth, the vein of truth, basically hold the mind behind the universe. But
Right.
so how did Aristotle see logos, and was logos different from was Aristotle's logos different than Plato's logos, Dr. Markos?
That's it. They both saw purpose and order in the universe. Actually, Aristotle's the one who works out the universal cosmological model in even more detail than Plato does. So he does believe there is mind. That, I mean, logos is also the root of our word logic, and
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle is more the father of logic than Plato is, at least logic in the technical sense of the word. And so Aristotle does not deny that there's a logos in the universe that orders everything. He'll use words like that. But he wanted to remind us that look, whose last word was tetelesthai, comes from telos. That's Jesus. It is finished. In Greek,
Mm.
it is finished or it is accomplished is tetelesthai. It's based on the root of telos. In other words, it has been the completion, the fulfillment, the end and purpose for which I came into the world has been completed on the cross. We have to wait for the resurrection, but it has been accomplished. And so that is a word. And it's not like Plato doesn't know the word telos. It's just that Aristotle uses it even more, right? And in fact, when we use the word teleological, we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about something that points towards the end. There's another word, eschatology. Both of those words literally mean study of the end, but
Mm.
eschatology is more about the end of the world, where everything is heading. Think of Revelation. Whereas teleology is more what is the end or purpose or essence of every person, of every group. Why are these things the way they are? And Aristotle was the one who asked us to identify all the causes of
Mm.
something. See, Bill, modern people, Aristotle had four causes. We in the modern West, especially, have narrowed it to two. We believe in the material cause, what it's
Mm.
made of, and we believe in the efficient cause, the sort of simple mechanical cause and effect. But
Mm.
we've left out the formal cause, which has to do with the essence of a thing, like masculinity and femininity. We've also left out the final cause, which is
Mm.
the telos. What is its purpose? What is the reason for its being? And I think I used the example. I didn't make this up. It's been used for a long time. If we look at the famous statue of David by Michelangelo, and we ask what is the material cause, it is that one piece of flawed marble out of which David was sculpted. If we ask what the efficient cause is, it actually is Michelangelo. He is the one who actually built it, cause and effect. But if we ask what the formal cause is, it actually is the human shape
Mm.
of David that gives form and shape to the statue, and that predates the statue. And then the final cause, its ultimate purpose, is to glorify God and to glorify man. And we always want to leave out. We don't want what is the chief end of man, Bill, according to the
To
Westminster.
according to the Westminster Confession, is
Yep.
to what is it? Is to know
Glorify
God and
God,
to glorify God and
glorify
to
God, and enjoy Him forever.
enjoy Him forever. I had it backwards. I was trying to say to
Oh
enjoy
yeah,
God, but no, it's to glorify God and enjoy Him
wonderful.
forever.
But you have
Yep.
to understand what that is that's the tell us. That's the final cause. Our
Yep.
ultimate reason for being is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And just to make that distinction is very Aristotelian to understand. I mean, our efficient cause is the mother that gave us birth, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
something beyond that. Our material cause is our DNA. But actually, our DNA is more the blueprint. In some ways, it's our
Yeah.
formal cause. It's what we've understood about DNA. It is our formal cause. And even our masculinity and femininity are formal causes. We are one of the two sexes.
Yeah. Whoa. We went there already. But
Oh, you
no,
can't help it. I mean,
I mean, Aristotle had a lot to say about that kind of stuff. I mean,
yeah.
this is something that you brought out, which is, I know, something you will love to riff on, if you will, to use a musician term. I love
Yeah.
using that because that's kind of
Blue
what we
jazz.
do.
Blue jazz.
Yeah,
We
I
improvise.
noticed. Yeah, we do. We talk about the stuff we know. In jazz music, even as a musician, I will tell you, nothing will come out in a solo that you don't know already. Like that's just the way it is.
Ah, okay.
So anyway, I would I wanted to turn to. I have it marked here. Stunning quote for somebody that has never talked about this before, and just want to reach out to. I'll just mention I have a friend who has recently been talking to me about their friend and how to reach them because their friend is having a hard time reconciling how Christ is the only way to God. And I recommended couple of books to them, but really just trying to get this idea in their friend's mind that as Christians we don't have to be afraid of other religions. I mean, Jesus is the fulfillment of so much, and I don't want to spoil it here, but I'm just going to read this quote you wrote on page XI, page
Oh, let
11
me get.
in your in your preface.
For
You
those who don't
said,
speak Latin, that's 11, right?
yeah, page 11 in your preface, you said, just as Moses, who was trained in the pagan wisdom of the Egyptians, Acts 7:22, willingly received management advice from his pagan father-in-law in Exodus 18, so Christian apologists from Boethius in the 6th century to Anselm in the 11th to C.S. Lewis in the 20th have effectively used Aristotle's terminology and methodology to defend the faith and work out its full implications. So kind of flesh that out a little bit. So are you saying, Dr. Markos, that we could actually learn something from these pagan people
We
trying to understand
we
the
can
Logos and the
indeed.
Telos?
My Plato book, the subtitle was From Plato to Christ, How Platonic Thought Shaped the Christian Faith. And at first they
Hmm.
said, why don't we have the same subtitle? I said, no, I want how Aristotelian thought clarified the Christian faith. Because what
Hmm.
Aristotle is so good at is terminology,
Hmm.
establishing categories so that we can arrange our thoughts. You cannot have the Summa by Thomas Aquinas, everything systematically without Aristotle. And even though Calvin and Luther did not particularly care much for Aristotle, they still would not exist without Aristotle teaching them how to make a system, how to figure out the categories and levels and what. I mean, even a lot of classification of animals was influenced by Aristotle. There were others, but Aristotle is also at the core of what there's a word for that. Oh, I can't remember now, but when the top, no, no, when you name and classify all the animals with those Latin endings and stuff
Oh,
like that, there's a word for that. I can't remember it right now.
is it
But
genus?
something like, well, that genus, the species is all part
No,
of
that's.
the way you categorize things.
I mean,
And
I
again,
have the
that's
picture
an
in my mind. I've got the
Aristotelian.
tree
Yeah, you can
there.
see it, right? It's an Aristotelian way of thinking about things. And just like, and I use Moses there, right? Because his father-in-law, Jethro, and not Jethro Tull, Bill. I don't know if you're a fan of Jethro Tull. You like
Never been
music.
a huge fan. I know. I know. I
Not a
mean, I've
huge
played
fan.
their music before, like so many
But
others.
this Jethro,
Taxonomy.
Moses'
Hey,
father-in-law, what's
there
that?
we go. Our friend Quincy Prickett chimed in here. He said taxonomy is the word.
That is
Pixels of light.
exactly the right word. Thank
That's
you,
right.
thank you. Good
Thank you guys. Thank you.
taxonomy
Thank you.
of
Thank you.
how you categorize things, and that is the
Pixels
genus,
of
the
light
species,
said the
etc.
same thing. That you guys know more about this stuff than we do.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
All
We
right.
got a good electronic
Yeah.
audience there. What we call it, digital or
I
whatever
will
it's called.
say, have you ever noticed this though? It's so much harder to bring stuff to mind when you're in front of a camera. I don't know why that is, but
That's true. I
anyway,
know.
go go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's amazing. So, but what is Jethro explaining to Moses? Delegate, delegate, delegate. Every day you delegate authority. You have to go from the big to the small to the small. Other than that, you can't make order out of everything. Again, Aristotle is a very rational person, but that doesn't mean he's a complete rationalist who thinks all there is reason. He believes in contemplation and he believes in beauty and all of these things. But again, okay, all Christians understand that Christ was born in the fullness of time. But what does that mean? I think most people would accept that fullness of the time very much includes the Roman Empire, right? Caesar Augustus became the first Roman emperor. right, in 27 BC, and he established the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. Some say the longest reign of peace the Western world has known. And his reign goes all the way to 14 AD. So when Jesus is born, he is born during the longest reign of peace. It's because of the Roman order, the Roman roads, that Paul was able to safely take the gospel not only along the roads, but along the waterways. Okay, when we knocked out the Houthis who were messing with the ships and stuff, we were doing a Roman thing. You got to keep the waterways and the walking ways clear, and I guess we would include the air as well for planes. That's important, but that's not all. It's not just Roman order and justice, it's Greek philosophy and thought that gave a language. Hebrew is a very poetic language. It is not as precise in its taxonomy, if you will. It's not as precise as Greek and also Latin afterwards, but especially Greek. And we need these languages. You know, Bill and I are part of a Christian Muslim Bible study where we compare the Quran and the Bible, and we have to remind ourselves. Muslims believe that the Quran was literally dictated to Muhammad, whom they believe was illiterate. That is not what we believe as Christians, even though a lot of Christians think, that the Bible was written the way that some naughty Christians want to do their final exam, close their eyes and let God move the pen. It doesn't work like that, folks. That's called tempting God or testing God, not trusting God. And again, the Bible is meant to be translated in every language because every time you translate the Bible, you are incarnating it into a new place, a new culture. And even though the study Bill and I go to, obviously we use an English translation of the Quran, none of them are really accepted. It's only the original Arabic. That's not or should not be the case with the Bible. Bill, you've heard people say, well, it's only the word of God in the original manuscripts, in the original Greek. And I'm like, hey, buddy, Jesus preached in Aramaic, not in Greek. So there's already a translation when you're reading the words in Greek. Do not be afraid of translation. God uses the language and the lingo that is there. And I do believe to get the kind of systematic theology of the New Testament, as opposed to the poetry, prophecy, and history of the Old Testament, we need not just words, but concepts
Yeah.
that are like logos, like telos, all of these sorts of things. So I really believe, though, that that's part of the fullness of time.
Yeah.
God,
The precision.
God incarnated himself. It was specific time and place.
The precision in order to clarify things. You know, when you're talking about, whenever you're talking about, God is love. Well, to us. I mean, people
All right.
love. I mean, people love steak. They love seafood.
Oh, right, yeah,
You
yes.
know. I love my wife. But that doesn't mean the same thing as like transcendent agape love. Like it's yeah, like it's in other words, there's clarity. Like the Greek language has four different kinds of love. For example, so you can really know the specifics outside of the English translations if you want to do the legwork and do the scholarly work. Or as I think it was Dr. Ehorn in their department said, brilliant language scholar. He said the Bible's so complex. He said the Bible is so beautiful anybody can read it and begin to understand it, but if you want to know its depths, you have to have at least a PhD. I mean, you do. You really have to know Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Syriac. I mean, there's just so, and I know very few people that have done that alone. Plus, the history of thought and theology and things. It's like a Bible degree is like getting a degree in the last 3,000 years of thought. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really, it's pretty amazing. Okay. So I'm going to keep pushing through here just a little bit. Love where this is going. On page 4, you had this last paragraph here that brought up the law of non-contradiction. You said Aristotle takes this foundational law of logic most clearly in metaphysics. The same attribute cannot at the same time belong and not belong to the same subject in the same respect. And if you could indulge me, guys, I'll read the paragraph to you really quick. It says, it is impossible for anyone to believe the same thing to be and not to be. For what a man says, he does not necessarily believe, and if it is impossible that contrary attributes should belong at the same time to the same subject, and if an opinion which contradicts another is contrary to it, obviously it is impossible for the same man at the same time to believe the same thing to be and not to be. And he goes on, and
That's
and
pretty
it's like
clear, actually, isn't it?
what a refute in some ways to the postmodern thought, like
Yeah,
postmodern way of thinking for today. It's like, guys, it's either A or not A. It's either B or
right.
not B. Like A cannot be B and B cannot be A. Here.
Not in the
So
same time, in the same way. It's just, and see, Bill, this is common sense, but it's not common sense till somebody says it and puts it in philosophical language. That's what they did at Nicaea, 1700 years ago now, in this fall, 1700 years ago, the Nicene Creed, 325 AD. They were taking what the Christians already believed, but putting it in clear philosophical language,
yeah,
like what you just read. So it's there. We need to know it. The law of non-contradiction, and that's why some people treat logic as a separate discipline, but others, and I do it, say for Plato, the logic was the foundation of everything else.
yeah.
First, you have to learn to think logically. And Bill, one of the most dangerous things that was happening to the woke until it got stopped by a certain person, I won't mention his name, until the wokeness got stopped, they were actually starting to say reason and logic are white things. Beyond
Yeah.
that being incredibly racist, because you're suggesting non-white people can't think logically. I can't think of a more racist comment. But it's a dangerous comment because if
Yeah.
we don't have logic and reason in common, if we cannot understand that the law of non-contradiction, then we can't argue. We can only fight. Thank God for Charlie Kirk that had a language and adopted a language to allow for these dialogues and debates on campus.
Yeah, if you think about, I mean, if you think about the kind of language that's been going around in our culture today, um, you know, this is not a new problem. This level of pluralism and things have been around for a long time, for a very long time.
Even
And
before Plato, the Pre-Socratics, some of them.
yeah, I was going to say
Yeah, some
like
of them were
this,
relativists. Yeah,
you know, and
sophists.
and it, I mean, one could even make the argument that it goes even deeper in Eastern philosophy. I mean, it's
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah, pluralism itself, the idea that truth cannot be figured out by any one person or any one culture, and it's your personal experience and your cultural upbringing, your nature versus nurture, which develops your truth. That idea, I've heard many apologists from all over the world in every continent say that is at the foundation of one of the biggest cultural issues that they have to deal with, is the idea that people can, because you believe it, it's true. And I've even heard Christian, I mean, that's very anti-Christian. I've even
yeah.
heard Christians say, and actually, this is a funny story. In Malaysia this summer, whenever I was talking about the nature of truth and what we believe and belief and stuff, on this Trinity tour with Explain International with Sam Nissan and company. They all died laughing when I said this. I said, it's not uncommon to hear some, Bible Belt church lady to say, well, honey, if that's true for you, that's all
Huh?
right. It might not be true for me, but if that's true for you, that's okay. It's like, no, that's not okay, because if it's that's not how truth works. That's not how we.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So Aristotle
I'll
believed
give you
truth was discoverable. In other words,
I'll give you a great example. Okay, most people are familiar with C.S. Lewis's Liar, Lunatic, or Lord, right? And
yeah,
Lewis integrates that into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Most of you know that story, right? With the Chronicle of Narnia. That first Lucy goes into the wardrobe to Narnia, comes back, then she and Edmund go in, right? Then when they come back, she says, "Good, Edmund has been with me. Now you'll believe me." And Edmund decides to be nasty and peevish and lies and says, "I was never there." And so the two older, Peter and Susan, go to the professor and say, "We're afraid that Lucy is insane, right? Because come on, you only have to look at her and know she's not crazy. Well, how could she say crazy things, right?" And then he explains to her, "Look, Lucy is claiming to have been to another place and come back. Either she's been there for real, or she's lying and we know that she doesn't tell lies, or she's crazy and we know she's not crazy. For now, we have to accept that maybe what she said is true. Now, in the Hollywood movie, they did that. They actually worked through that logic, and I was so excited. And then, after establishing the logic, then the professor says, well, we have to believe her. She's family. And completely destroyed. Do you understand the logical fallacy? Edmund is also family, right? So it's not like there's one truth for
Right.
Lucy and one. It's just because it's your family and you love them. The truth is the truth. And so it was like Hollywood did it. And then they pulled back because it was the same thing. Oh, well, that's good for you, honey. I mean, sometimes it's because we're being nice. But in the end, it's not nice to deny the truth because that leads to all sorts of very horrible things. Bill,
Well,
you were at the killing fields in Cambodia. You know what it can lead to when truth becomes relative and is thrown out.
yeah. Yeah, well, and let's be fair here too. Our the sweet old church ladies that I'm the fictional church ladies out there is just
Yeah.
whatever comes to mind. The reason I use that is because sweet old church ladies usually have a very sincere heart that just wants somebody
Yes.
to do well and wants somebody to get ahead in life and wants somebody to feel accepted and welcome and at home. And the South is a very hospitable culture. Like
True.
it's a hospitality culture. So it's like we want to be hospitable and welcoming and warm, but it's as if like when you allow somebody to live out a lie, what you're really doing there is that you are looking at the oncoming bus that's about to run them over, and you're standing there saying, well, if you want to stand there in that street, that's okay. It's just fine. And I don't think a lot of people really even think of it that way. It's like, not trying to be uncharitable here, but
Yeah.
it can be a serious problem, not just in the United States, but across the world.
Yeah.
As you know, I operate in different parts of the world, and there's some cultures, I'm not going to name them by name, that will lie right to your face
Yeah. Yeah.
in essence, just to be hospitable. And that's
Yeah,
not a
no,
good,
yeah.
it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And you have to press
They will
them.
tell you what they
And
want to hear. They will tell you what
yeah,
they think you want to hear.
then when you press and press and press, they'll finally say, okay, you know, so yeah, so Aristotle, you were talking about this. We talked about this briefly earlier. You point out throughout the book that he believed, I mean, in several different places, this telos thing keeps coming up, this order to the cosmos and things that Aristotle believed in, and then putting things in their place. I wanted to talk because I love history of ideas and how an idea can develop over time. And, Aristotle was pre-Christian, and Christianity came on the scene, and somehow those two things seem to come together. I would think, I'd never thought about it so deeply, but while I was just going through some of the pages of the book today, thinking about how those two worlds must have collided in order to bring the scientific revolution that we had today. And I kind of knew that already, but it made me think on like a deeper level that these people trying to find an order to the universe, an order to, and some of them leaping off of Thomas Aquinas, who basically, as is pointed out, baptized Aristotle,
Yeah, that's good.
brought
Yeah.
him, and in that sense brought him into the Western world. But a lot of people don't realize this either, is that Aristotle was also widely revered in Muslim and Islamic
Yes.
philosophy as well.
In fact, the Islamic helped bring him back to Europe.
Yeah,
There were, what's it, Avicenna and Averroes were two Muslim
Averroes.
writers who wrote commentaries on Aristotle, and that helped bring it back to the West and to Thomas Aquinas. And in fact, in Dante's Inferno, right, there are virtuous pagans. Well, there shouldn't be any virtuous pagans after Christ, right? And
Hmm.
yet he lists three Muslims there. One is the Saladin, who was the antagonist to the Crusaders during the Crusades, but he was respected, sort of like the Yankees respected Robert E. Lee. He was the good enemy that they respected, right? And the other two are Averroes and Avicenna, who helped to bring Aristotle to the West.
Hmm.
So yes, they played it, and they also helped bring some of the mathematic, algebra and stuff. Some of the Arabs helped to bring that back into the
Yeah,
Western world, and you can see it in their architecture, their knowledge of math.
sure. And then there's also Al-Kindi and Al-Ghazali too, who
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
gave
there's
us
others. Yeah,
gave us the Kalam cosmological argument,
that's right.
which does seem kind of Aristotelian in a sense. I
Yeah, it
mean,
is.
it's very logic oriented. You know, everything that
Right.
begins to
It
exist
works
has
its
a
way through a
cause.
syllogism.
Yes.
It works its way through a
Yeah.
syllogism with a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. It's not exactly that Aristotle invented it per se, but he perfected it and
Yeah.
explained how it works and what happens when it doesn't work and when it's illogical or when it's invalid, etc., etc. But yes, that idea and basically all of Aristotle's um, proofs for the existence of God are one or another version of if you don't have a God, you have infinite regress. You go back and back and back and back, and there is nothing to begin motion. God is the unmoved mover because the one who ultimately sets everything in motion, if he himself is also in motion, then who started him? So you need a beginning to everything. And that's something that modernism has just forgotten, it willfully forgot.
Yeah.
You need to have water does not rise above its level. You have to start.
Yeah.
The origin is greater than what it gives birth to. And Aristotle taught us to think that way.
Yeah. And it's sad. It's been to our detriment too. That you know, it's amazing how we see this in our classics program. We call it the honors program at HCU. Our students that you and I work with on a weekly basis. It's like those guys discover a part of their mind that they've never been introduced to, and they start thinking about logic and you know the way these ideas have framed the world. We stand on we feel like these things come from a vacuum. You know,
Yes.
there's no such thing as a new idea. A lot. The more you
Right.
study the history of history of ideas, the more you see that there's literally nothing new under the sun, as the Bible says. And that's one of the reasons why I would encourage people to study the history of ideas, to study how these cultures come up with this stuff, because um, it helps you to think through the stuff that you're facing every single day of your life. You know, like Aristotle had a lot of wisdom for today. I mean, honestly, if everybody say there was no religion in the world whatsoever, like there's just nothing, you know, we live in a possible world where there's no religion, and all we had was Aristotle, a lot of the
Yeah,
chaos that we have in our culture would disappear overnight.
yeah,
Like
that's
if
true.
people really just align themselves with like the law of non-contradiction, for example,
Yes.
like, you know, it's like what I'm sorry that you feel that way, but that's not true. It's there's a contradiction here, you know. But we try to
Fights
live.
break out. Yeah, fights break out when logic breaks down. When they
Yeah,
realize they couldn't answer Charlie, they have to silence him. That's crazy. As long as we can talk. Oh my! By
yeah,
the way, your fans go to the Federalist. It's an online journal, and they just published a new essay I wrote comparing Charlie Kirk to Socrates and to the way he asks questions and to the way Socrates was accused of exactly the things that his accusers were guilty of. And the same thing happened with Charlie Kirk. But and it's just when people when you can no longer debate and argue, that's when you fight. That's why we need
yeah,
the Tao. You mentioned that earlier. And Lewis
hmm,
used the word Tao rather than logos because it's an Eastern word, and he wants to explain that the universal moral ethical law code that is written in our conscience is universal. It's both West and East. Now, that doesn't
yeah,
mean people follow it. We know it, and then we break it, and that's why we're guilty. But the law itself is written in the conscience of all people. Even the pagans who are without the law are a law unto themselves, for it has been written in their conscience. Romans chapter 2.
yeah, yeah. This is it's true. Just like our friend Alex, Alex here said, she's a pretty frequent viewer. You know, she said it's hard for people to let go emotionally when confronted with the truth. I think many people today struggle with that rather than cling to what's wrong. And then she goes on to say, that's how I left as a progressive, that's how I felt as a progressive Christian. And I think that's very true. I mean, when you start basing everything on your personal experience and on your feelings instead of stuff that you can actually ground things in, then it's going to be a problem. Cause problems not just for you, but for everybody. I saw a couple of people, and I'm getting to your questions. I
I
promise.
just figured out. I just figured out how to put that. Now I'm just seeing for the first time the
Oh,
comments. They
cool.
weren't there before. Now I found
There
them.
was plenty. There's plenty. There's, I
Yep.
think, 18 comments so far, and I really appreciate that, guys. Some of you guys could be first time viewers. We've got a lot of viewers going on right now on different platforms. Listen, what I want to encourage you guys to do is if you have any questions, listen, me and Dr. Markos have like pastoral hearts too. If you have questions outside of the scope of what we're talking about, we can take those too. You know, if somebody's logging onto this podcast and they're like, man, I've always wanted to ask a Christian this, or I've always wanted to ask a pastor that. I used to be a pastor for about 10 years. So youth pastor and senior pastor both. So listen, that's part of what this broadcast is about. We want you guys to be engaged, and we always dedicate the last half hour or so to just field whatever questions we can that come up here. We've got a couple already marked and ready to go. Thank you for your questions, but if you want to input some questions into the comments, we can see those, and we will bring them onto the broadcast and discuss those. So thank you for already being very engaged this talk. So, okay. Now, I want to get into like Christian apologetics and Aristotle just a little bit, and theology, as we bring the conversation more to a close personally and bring other people into it. There's still a few things that we really need to talk about here. One is dualism. Now, Aristotle, I'm not completely clear on exactly what he believed as far as like dualism, and he also believed in the tripartite version of human beings too. Like there's a spirit, soul, and body, but and which is what Paul would have mentioned in 1 Thessalonians 5:23. Let your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless at the coming Lord. But I don't think that Paul was trying to bring Aristotle into the equation as much as he was trying to say like let the whole person be complete, you know.
Right. And it's
So
important, Bill, to remember that a lot of times when I see a link from Aristotle to the early church, I'm not always saying that it's a direct link. I'm saying that Aristotle got something right. Okay. Now, sometimes with Aquinas and Dante, it is a direct thing. But see, even with Plato, that doesn't. I'm not saying that we know that Paul studied this. We know Paul knew Greco-Roman poetry and philosophy a little bit, but it's more that through general revelation, Aristotle touched on something that is true. Now, I would say, generally speaking, in the theological realm, Plato is better than Aristotle, except in one area. Plato tended to believe that our soul was sort of trapped in our body and was trying to escape our body. Not as bad as the Neoplatonists later on, but still, they're separate. But Aristotle, amazingly, comes closer than anybody else to the idea of the incarnation. Okay, the incarnation, referring to Jesus, means that Jesus was fully God and fully man. Wasn't half and half, was fully divine, fully human. We are also incarnational beings, Bill, not because we're fully God and fully man, but because we're fully physical and fully spiritual. We're not souls trapped in bodies. We're not animated meat, like they call it. We are
mhm.
enfleshed souls. And Aristotle came up with the phrase hylomorphism. That's kind of like it's kind of like the form and the matter are one. There is something incarnational. That goes way beyond Plato. And in fact, very important, Bill, Plato toys with reincarnation. Now, he only talks about it in his myths. That's why maybe he's only using it. He never talks about it in the dialogue part, only the myth. But Aristotle makes it clear there is no reincarnation. And the reason there's no reincarnation is because each individual one of us is a unique mingling of the physical and the spiritual, of the body and the soul. So you can't have reincarnation. So
Mm.
boom, and again, a lot of Aristotle, I'm sorry, Aquinas and stuff looks back to Aristotle in his more incarnational understanding. One of the reasons he could not believe in the form of a soul is because each one of us has an individual soul. We're not part of some one soul. he really did have something much closer to that intimate incarnational mingling of body and soul that is unique to Christianity. So it's kind of amazing that Aristotle was moving in that area. And it's got to do with the idea of the telos. And, every discipline has its own telos, right?
Yeah.
The human race does, but individuals have their own as well. So Aristotle is the opposite of an existentialist. An existentialist says that existence precedes essence. We're just born
Mm.
as a blank slate with nothing, and we make up our essence or telos as we go. Even our own sexuality today or gender. Not for
Yeah.
Aristotle, right? The essence comes before the existence. Very important concepts because Christians have fought these heresies many times right from the beginning.
Awesome. So, yeah, we have like we have all kinds of things coming
Good
in here.
questions.
That's pretty cool. So, great, great, great. So let's keep this going here. Um, page
Yep.
121. Page
What's he
121
said?
said,
Hylomorphous. They got it.
yeah, there it is. Yep. Let's see, 121. Let me get my handy dandy book here. I was trying to work on some technology where you're giving this explanation here. See if we could bring
Oh,
on, see if I could Bluetooth connect my phone and bring a buddy of ours on that's commenting a lot. He really knows this stuff. I was like, man, I could just bring you on the show. Like I was sending
yeah.
him a text there.
Good.
So 121, it says, evil is evil precisely because we practice it knowingly. Evil
Say it
is
all- Oh, yes.
evil is
Yes.
evil because we practice it knowingly. So here's a challenge to our theology. This is very
Oh,
similar
yes.
to 1 John chapter 3 verse 4 that basically says, that sin is knowingly breaking the law, is a willful transgression against the known law of God, which is what in theology we call it the ethical definition of sin. Now this is a divide in hamartiology in our theological schools, because there's one school, and I won't mention who, just for the sake of good conversation, that would believe in an illegal definition of sin, which means like anything that falls short of God's absolute and perfect will. The other side of things would say is there's an ethical view of sin, which says it's a transgression of the known law. In other words, you're tempted and you rebel and choose darkness rather than light. So it seems that Aristotle brought a more legal definition of sin and evil out of his ethics. And so can you
Yes.
explore that just a little bit, Dr.
Yeah.
Markos? And did that
One
have
of
any
the
bearing on Christian theology?
Oh, no, I think it does. I mean, one
Mm-hmm.
of the few things that Plato got wrong was he believed that virtue is knowledge. If we knew it, we would do the virtuous thing. That would be
Mm,
nice if that were true. But it's wrong, okay? And Aristotle knew that he was wrong. The only thing that makes it a crime, a sin, is that we know it's wrong and we do it anyway, right? I mean, look, our entire legal system is a mingling of the Old Testament Torah, the law with all of its laws, and
yeah.
Aristotelian understanding of motivation, the difference between first and second and third degree murder, between a crime of passion and cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Aristotle explained that perfectly. He explains the difference. We're more guilty when we have no choice, right? There are different degrees and levels of these things, right? And and
Right.
and if we're being forced, like I said, if we're being forced to do it, is it now? It's possible you could say, well, you could let that guy kill you, right? So you do have a limited amount of volition there, but it's a little bit different than the person who is under no duress, still does the wrong thing or plays traitor and turns somebody else in. So, I mean, Aristotle just understood that the nature of ethics is you know something is wrong and you do it anyway. Okay, and we need to understand that. Okay, look, I believe in original sin, but all these people, oh, it's unfair. Look, every one of us sins on our own. Okay, we
Mm-hmm.
inherit a sinful nature, but all of us do still sin. And Jesus was tempted in every way, but he did not sin. He was perfect. That's not true of us. We can resist some temptation, but not
Yeah.
all of it. We are broken. We are fallen, depraved. But still, that doesn't mean we can't do anything good. Pagans can do good things. That doesn't mean they're salvific. They're still in a state of rebellion against God, but they can do virtuous action. And I
Right.
believe that God is pleased by the virtuous action, as he was pleased by Cornelius before he became a believer, as he was pleased by the centurion who said, I am a man under authority, right? Just say the word. I mean, Jesus is pleased. In fact, he's shocked by the faith of that centurion. The faith of that centurion does not save him, but it certainly pleases Jesus. I don't like this idea that, like, some people are so bad as like, if a pagan does something virtuous, it makes it even more evil. Now, if a pagan is being self-righteous and says, I have done this, and therefore I am a paragon of virtue, and God will love me, that's different. That's self-righteousness. But,
Right.
when it says, don't you know that all your righteousness is like filthy rags? What it really means is all your self-righteousness is like filthy rags. God is not angered by righteous behavior, but he is angered by self-righteous behavior. We have to understand that
Yep.
difference. Aristotle understands those shades of difference, which are so important.
Amen. Amen. It's good. It's just amazing to see Aristotle. I want to revisit Nicomachean Ethics after reading that. I want to see how deep he
Oh,
goes
yeah.
with all of these things, and yeah, and I wanted to make sure that we, as far as like ethics go, he would directly. And you brought this up earlier, and I didn't want to. I wanted to save it till the end because it's just so amazing to me. Like how he was. He would have been diametrically opposed to Rousseau, for example. And
Yes.
yes, I was in the Killing Fields, which was,
Yep.
if people
Directly.
aren't familiar with that, just the story in brief is Pol Pot, the dictator of Cambodia in he was dictator in the 1970s, decided to wipe out about 3.5 million of his people, which is almost half the population of Cambodia at that time. And he buried them in these open fields outside the city of Phnom Penh. And I did go visit those things. And one of the it's life altering to see that. It's just unbelievable, and I'll never forget telling my wife about it, and she, and Tabitha just said, the crazy thing is it's different than Hitler because Hitler was targeting a people group outside his own, but this guy targeted his very own people, and the reason he targeted them was purely by Rousseauian philosophy. He
Yep.
was taught Rousseau, and he said, I want to take my people back to a state of nature.
This
And that's
noble
exactly
step.
what he did. Brought them back to the Stone Age, really. I mean, in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. So can you talk about that? Like, what does it mean to have this state of nature, and how is that diametrically opposed to the telos, or
Yep.
the purpose in which we were created? And we're going to get into Aristotle's view of the way civilization works just a little bit, and then we'll start taking some questions.
And what's interesting is that combines both the book he wrote called The Nicomachean Ethics, or sometimes just Ethics, and his Politics. He wrote a book called Politics. You have to put those two together. And
Yeah.
again, Aristotle says that if you're not a member of a city, it's either because you're an angel or because you're a beast. You might as well be a wild animal out there. If you're not part of some kind of group that civilizes you. Civilization comes from civitas, which is the Greek word, I'm sorry, the Latin word for city, just as polis is the Greek word for city. So politicians, politics, civilization, citizen, all these words come from the idea of city and living together as a group. And again, Rousseau thought that man is by nature good. Man is born free, but is everywhere in chains. That's
Yeah.
the famous opening line of his The Social Contract. And he thought if we can get back to nature, everything will be perfect. But no, he thought that all the sin was just societal. And we're still
Yeah.
dealing with this. Wokeness is the idea that all sin is societal rather than personal. So that
Right.
certain groups, if they're minority groups or if they're so-called oppressed, they actually cannot even be sinful. It's kind of ridiculous. But this goes back to Rousseau. Of course, it also includes Marx bringing it together. Thinking of the killing fields, there is a great old movie called Ninochka with Greta Garbo, and it's a comedy. And it's got a great line that is both really horrendous and yet incredibly convicting at the same time. So Ninochka is a Soviet apparatchik, and she's come to Paris, and she's talking about the most recent purges of Stalin, and that's the same thing that Pol Pot did 20 years later, 30 years later. And she said, the last series of purges was a great success. There will be fewer but better Russians. And that's funny, but also terrifying, because it's exactly but because the idea is man is by nature good, but he is corrupted by society. And certain people are so corrupted because they're Jews, because they're landlords, because they're intellectual, whatever it is. They're so corrupted that you have to wipe them out and then re-educate everybody else. That's where education becomes social engineering. Read The Abolition of Man. If we had listened to our Aristotle, he would have explained to us that you cannot perfect man in that way. We are not better out in the wild. We are just uncivilized and brutal.
Mm-hmm.
We need
Yeah.
okay, ethics. What's the telos of life? What is the good of life that we all seek after? And he said it's happiness, by which he didn't mean ha ha ha. He means happy, almost like the difference between,
Yeah.
almost like joy, like Jesus, the joy. Where does this happiness comes from? And it comes from acting virtuously.
Yeah.
And that's what he talks about, virtue, the mean between the extremes. Courage is not cowardice, but as we began this podcast, Bill, courage is also not reckless, headstrong cockiness, running in like a maniac, what do you call it, berserker or something. That's
Yeah.
not what it is. Courage is sticking to your post and doing what is right. Even temperance does not, it's funny that our temperance in America now means not drinking because of the prohibition, but temperance does not mean not drinking. It means drinking and doing everything else in its proper moderation, not becoming a wild licentious person, but also not becoming a rigid ascetic who beats his body.
Yeah.
Both, and avoids both. He tells us that both are wrong. So we
Yeah.
need Aristotelian ideas of virtue and the good life.
Yeah. I mean, you've brought it up a couple of times because it's on the forefront of everybody's memory. But bear with me on this, because I can remember just a few weeks ago, just everybody's world was rocked, whether you disagreed with him or not, with Charlie Kirk's murder. And I remember at that moment it's such a vivid example for me that, like, I just kind of had one of those moments where it's like, this happened. All right, God, what do I do? Like, what do I need to do more? And nothing really come to mind. It's like there's nothing more I could be doing. And in some ways, like that is the kind of courage we're talking about here, is that you're living in your purpose. You're living in your telos. Like, it's not my job to go start the next TPUSA chapter. I'm working with Ratio Christi. It's not my job to start political activism. I'm working with Ratio Christi. What we are doing is already shaping what's going on, in the shaping what's going on in the culture. And that's what we're trying to do with, this ministry that we take part in every week, trying to just help Christians be thoughtful again and participate within society in a very fruitful way, which is something that Aristotle would have definitely advocated for. Find your purpose, find your intent, and go with it. And but yeah, like you pointed out, just men are inherently political beings in some sense, and what that means is not political in the politics, not in the politics way, but in the civic way. In other words, we are naturally beings that are we live based upon operating within a societal structure. We need to figure out where that is, what that is, and how we do it best.
I don't know if you got to this part of the book, Bill, but the Greeks had a word for somebody who refused to get involved in the polis and civic things. They called him an idiot. Now, the word idiot is the word we have to understand, because, in the not that distant past, they used to call autistic kids idiots, which sounds like this horrible, terrible slur. We were so afraid of words. Idiot and autistic mean the same thing. They basically mean somebody who is stuck in his own individual little private world. Both words mean that in Greek and Latin. And that's what you were, an idiot, because instead of joining in the community that you were part of, you tried to silo yourself away. You were an idiot. You lived in your own private world. The word is used in John when it says, Jesus came to his idion, but his idion did not accept him. He came to his own, but his own people did not accept him. Well, we've
Interesting.
become our own little silo, and that's not the way we're meant for. And you know what Aristotle did know, Bill? The reason we're meant for society is because we were made in the image of a triune God. We have to remember that. We're made in the image of a God who is quite literally his own community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so the reason we join together is not, as John Locke thought, because of scarcity, although that's important, but ultimately because of the imago Dei, the image of God, the image of the Trinity that has been imprinted in us. And so it is not good for man to be alone. Now, that specifically means marriage, but it also means society.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just to be clear, it's not like you're saying like autism equals everybody's idiots, because
No,
that's
no,
not the
no.
case at all.
No, no.
Because
What happens
most
is
of the
the
autistic,
disease. Yeah.
I was going
Yeah,
to
the
say, like,
disease
some of the most
causes you.
brilliant people
Oh, yeah.
I've ever met in my life are clearly in
Oh,
that
Elon
spectrum.
Musk. Elon
Yeah,
Musk.
but
They're talking about the
it's
old
one of
days
those
where
words that's
you're
like
unable to communicate.
etymologically it's lost its meaning. Like we just throw it around, like the word awesome. We use that
Yeah,
word,
that's
and
true. Full of
I'm
hope.
guilty of this too.
Yeah.
We use that word awesome quite a bit, but it used to be really a descriptor for who God is. Where now it's just we just throw it around like, man, awesome job on that video game, or
Well,
whatever.
unfortunately, whoever the PC person was decided we can no longer use the word Asperger's, which used to be a way of saying a high functioning autistic person that can do it, as opposed to an autistic person that is nonverbal. I mean, that
Yeah,
really is trapped in their own little mind. So I
you
don't know,
know,
they did spectrum stuff and all that. But yes, we should stop being afraid of words and try to get to the meaning behind the words and
yeah.
understanding so we can really help people.
It's one of those things like we don't talk about this enough because it can go into this area where it's
Yeah,
like, oh man, like what do we do? Like, what did he just say? But it's like people can get so easily offended because of the emotions that are packed
yeah,
behind the way we have redefined a word, and that's
yeah.
why we have these conversations. Sometimes it's just like, that's, it's interesting to look at some of the what you call the etymology, or the trait when you trace this word back definitionally speaking. What does it mean? So yeah, let's get to a couple of questions here, and I'm going to try a little trick here. We may be able to bring somebody on the show, but we're going to see how it
Oh,
works. We've been
wow.
communicating. We'll see. Um,
Ah, heck.
I'm going to start with my friend. He's got a YouTube channel here, Seek and Find. Add this to the broadcast. He said, Justin Martyr said that devils told lies to pagans based on what they knew Jesus would do, like miracles and resurrection. What do you think about this? How would this compare to your view, Dr. Markos?
Every time you find a parallel between something in paganism and something in Christianity, there's always four ways to read it. One way is to say it's a complete coincidence. But you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you just thought everything was a coincidence. So the three main ways is one to say that it is a diabolic delusion. And that is possible. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It could be something the devil sets up to fool us. And so we do need discernment. We need to be careful. I'll give you a good example of that. I am a Christian. I've been one for a long time. I'm pretty strong spiritually. I would never mess around with the Ouija board, and I would never attend a seance. The devil does have power, and you don't go there. You're going to be fooled. God speaks again and again against fortune telling and all of that sorts of stuff. So there are certain things I would completely avoid. And there are such things as demonic deceptions. But I do believe that is the minority, right? The other one, and this is what the theological liberals will say, is, well, of course there's a link between that paganism and Christianity. That's because Christianity is just a more evolved myth. And that's what Lewis thought. C.S. Lewis thought before Tolkien told him that Christ is the myth made fact. He just thought, yeah. And if you go to any pagan website, they'll say, look at all these stories of dying and rising gods, Osiris and Adonis and Balder and all these people. And it's like, folks, read C.S. Lewis. That's what actually proves Christ, right? So, but sometimes, it might be the church just adopting something. Like Christians taking, what do you call it, aerobics and making Christian aerobics with Christian song. And sometimes it's just silly, right? Okay, but I would argue that the majority, not all of them, we need discernment, but the majority is that in that pagan thing we see a foreshadowing of the truth that is to come. So that Jesus not only fulfills the law and prophets, he fulfills the highest dreams of the pagan people. Because we're all made in God's image. God has written eternity in the hearts of men. He has put a desire in us. We grope after and reach at, though he is not far from any of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. And so that's, of course, Acts 17, when Paul speaks in Athens. So again, that's what we have to see. There are different readings of it. It could be a demonic deception. It might be just a Christian adaptation. But I think if we really search, we will find in the majority of cases that through the power of general revelation, the way God speaks to all people through creation, the conscience, logic, imagination, that there is a little beam of light that's pointing to the light, to the God who is light.
Yeah.
Quick answer.
Amen. So here's another question. And like I said, if you guys have some questions out there, just feel free to drop them and we'll see if we can get to them today. Another question. This is from our friend Quincy Prickett. Have you met Quincy before? I'm pretty sure you have, Dr. Markos.
I think so. The name's familiar.
He's a long bearded and manly man that walks into my office at school from time to time and unloads a bunch of food. Okay.
Every time I see him, I think it's going to be Quincy Jones. Remember Quincy Jones? Famous
different Quincy altogether. But no, he said, with the idea of nothing under the sun, do you think that every philosophical system fits into classic Hellenistic schools? Now, before we go crazy here, let me see if we can do this. I'm going to attempt to do this. Quincy, are you there?
I just heard a voice.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there we go. That sounded like a gruff, bearded voice, didn't it?
Can you hear me?
Is he on here?
I hear him.
I can hear you, but I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear him. Can you hear him, Bill?
Can you hear me?
No, I can't. Isn't that weird? I can hear his...
I can hear him, Bill. I can hear him, but you can't. That's weird.
Oh, that is wild. All right. Well, Quincy, you go ahead and start talking and explain your question. Have a conversation with Dr. Markos. I'm going to figure out why I can't hear you.
Okay. So the classic Hellenistic schools of philosophy, such as Stoicism, Epicureanism, skepticism, Platonism, and even Aristotelianism, is it possible that, like, when I study philosophy today, I come to the idea that we really haven't changed much. Just about every modern school of philosophy kind of fits into one of those categories. What are your thoughts concerning that?
Well, you know, one famous person said, White was his name. He said that to a certain extent, all philosophy is footnotes to Plato. So there's some case that it all comes out of Plato. But yes, I wrote a book called Atheism on Trial, but my title was Nothing New Under the Sun, because most of the philosophical ideas are there. Now, I will say this, that I think one of the things that really changes in the Enlightenment is, okay, most of those ancient schools were in some way or another ontological. Ontology is the study of being. What is the nature of being? That doesn't mean epistemology didn't exist, the study of knowing. Aristotle has epistemology. But it seems to me when we get to Kant that people sort of abandon ontology, any faith that there really are essential things that exist apart from us, and we start to become epistemologists, believing that the only important thing is how we know things. So Aristotle, the ontologist, writes a book about every subject under the sun, every discipline, from politics to ethics to physics to all of them, to poetics. But what does Kant do? He writes a book called on reason, on understanding, a critique of judgment. In other words, Aristotle, the epistemologist, writes a treatise on every different way that we know the world. But I find the more that we go into epistemology, the more we start doubting anything actually exists, right? And then eventually we just give up on epistemology, and all it is linguistics and words. And then the deconstructions come and break down the words. So I think we're getting farther and farther away from the truth. But really, I don't know that we have, quote, evolved that far. Most of the basic questions were asked by Plato or Aristotle, by the Stoics, by the Epicureans. Most of it's there. And in that sense, philosophy is a footnote. But again, I just, it's really weird because starting with Descartes, we want greater certainty, and all we do is create less and less certainty. We don't believe anything anymore. So it's a very strange and troubling thing. It's almost like philosophers starting with Descartes wanted to cut off their overwhelming debt to Plato and Aristotle, and all they did is just go farther and farther away from the truth. Very frustrating.
Quincy, thank you so much for tuning in with us. I can't hear a word you're saying, so I'm gonna have to shut her off. But
Well, I
I'm
haven't
sure it
said
was great.
anything
I
yet.
don't know if anybody else could hear you either.
Oh, wait,
'cause
can you hear him now? He's speaking again.
Nope,
Did you hear him now?
I can't. No, for
Well,
some reason
that was odd.
doesn't transmit into my headphones. But it was a good experiment. Thanks for popping on, Quincy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on, Bill.
Thanks, Quincy.
All right, see you, buddy. All right, so yeah, well that was cool, neat little experiment. Like I said, there's so many adjustments been made in the software lately. I don't know what works and what doesn't. So
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
But-
you can't get back to the original.
there was a time when we could do that, and I could hear them and all this stuff. So, but okay, well, very very cool. Anybody else have any questions out there in listener land? If not, we'll begin to shut her down. But we'll give you all some time to throw something else up there. And thank you.
Somebody did ask a question about where was it? Oh yeah, this was Quincy. A fusion of virtue ethics and deontology. So virtue ethics is pretty much Aristotelianism. Deontology comes from Kant, and a deon means a duty or like a command. So deontology means that the most important thing is duty. And that's coming out of Kant's categorical imperative. There are overlaps between deontology and virtue ethics, but I think the problem with deontology is if your entire system of ethics is built on duty, but you don't believe in absolute forms, then how do you know that duty is the most important thing? I think that's the problem behind somebody like Kant. If you don't have what Aristotle called a major premise, if you don't have an absolute, then who is to tell you that doing your duty is better than not doing your duty? But still, the concept of duty is very important, and it's particularly, it's a very white thing. When I say white, I mean Northern Europeans, very much a German, British kind of thing, Scandinavian, and it's a good thing. But I think the danger, and Lewis actually talks about this, C.S. Lewis talks about it in Mere Christianity, the danger of pure deontology is that the only way to judge something is if it's your duty. But then Christians start to think, if I'm enjoying this, then I'm not doing my duty anymore, and I'm not being virtuous or godly. And that is terrible. There's so many Christians that they only think they're doing God's work if they're miserable. And Kant, who is supposedly a Christian, certainly a theist, could learn a lot from the pagan Aristotle, who taught us, and Lewis echoes it, that the reward of virtue is the more you really practice virtue, the more you enjoy virtue, because virtue becomes a habit. So I think we're better off going back to Aristotle than some of the Kantian stuff that's too dry and almost against the human and against the joy. If we're doing charity, we should eventually enjoy it because it is becoming who we are.
Quincy chimed back in. He said he'd considered that Jesus does what Jesus is doing on the Sermon on the Mount is that he adds virtues to the 613 commands in Torah, essentially adding virtue to the deontology of the Torah.
That's an interesting way to put it. With virtue now see, the interesting thing about Aristotle with virtue is that even though ultimately he's pointing back to absolutes, he says something about virtue that may sound relativistic, but I don't believe it is. Whereas for Plato, the courage, the measure of courage is the form of courage with a capital C. But for Aristotle, the measure of virtue is the virtuous man. But it's the man for whom virtue has become a habit. So it's not really relativistic, though it may seem to, because it's more human-based. But that's why I tell my students, don't just ask, what would Jesus do? Ask, what would Luther do? Or what would Calvin do? Or what would John Wesley do? I mean, what would Paul do? I mean, we can find human people that obviously we have to use our discernment, but we can use people that have embodied a certain virtue as a role model, though, as always, with discernment.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I should tell you guys you should pick this book up. It's on Dr. Markos's Amazon page, and you might as well pick up the trilogy. And I'd say if you read the trilogy, you would be, and you have no background in Greek thought whatsoever, you'd have a pretty good introduction to it, and it has some apologetic value because Dr. Markos, like me, even though I'm doing a PhD in intercultural studies, I can't stop thinking about apologetics while I'm doing it. And it seems to be the way Dr. Markos is wired as well. If you read any of his writings.
2 other books, if you want a completely rounded view of Greek thought, there's those 3 books. Then there's a book I wrote called The Myth Made Fact, reading Greek and Roman mythology through Christian eyes. And then there's another book called Ancient Voices, an insider's look at classical Greece that fills in the void of the other stuff I didn't talk about and brings in the other Greek voices. So those together draw it all together.
Yeah, and I have to personally endorse this one because this one was dedicated to me. Isn't that crazy? I love that. Dr. Markos surprised me with that, and first time I'd ever had a book dedicated to me, and I was just really
right outside a good Japanese restaurant, Hokkaido, right?
Hokkaido sushi.
Yeah, right outside of Hokkaido sushi.
Yeah, that was my coming back home present when I got off the road this summer. Was he gave me this book, which this was back in August. I knew it wasn't going to come out until September, so I was like, oh wow, an advanced copy. And he's like, oh, you should look on the inside of it. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I saw the autograph first, said for Bill, my partner in crime, Lou Markos, which is, yeah. And I was like, well, thank you very much. He's like, no, read it more. And said, for my good friend, fellow apologist, and ministry partner, Bill Scott. I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. So I was careful. I only bookmarked it. I didn't write in it. So this is precious to me. It's been read. Now it's going to be shelved and be shown to people.
We're a good team. So, if any of you folks are in Houston, come sit in on a Ratio Christi meeting. Tuesdays, 6:45 dinner, 7 o'clock meeting.
That's right. You are all welcome to that. And if you'd like to know more about Ratio Christi and how to get involved in that, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the comments. You can email me at billscott@ratiochristi.org, and that is my personal email address. So you can reach me there very quickly. And shoot me an email. I would love to talk to you more about what we do and what we do internationally as well. And that's right, Alex, you do need to visit. We miss you, man. Come back and see us, Alex Collins. Yeah. You remember Alex? She was that the vocal performance major. That's just really, really good. I think a bunch of us went to her senior recital. I can't remember if you were there or not, but yeah, very, very talented young lady. Has a YouTube presence of her own. So you guys go ahead and follow that comment all the way to YouTube. Get another channel going there. So guys, thank you very much. And shout out to Rashad and Quincy and Danny and see who else do we know on here. All kinds of different comments from Christian. Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate it. And share this around if you thought it was valuable. Share it on your YouTube channels. Share it on your Facebooks and your Twitters and your Instagrams, and let people know. And we just do appreciate what's going on here. And of course, Alex, yeah, we'll shout out to your channel, man, because you're doing good work. I follow your channel. And I've always said we need about 10,000 or maybe 20,000 more Christian YouTubers out there. So, and then there's people like Dr. Markos that don't need a YouTube channel. He's being interviewed on different channels every week.
I know so many times. It's like, I don't know.
Every week, I know that's going to be consistent. It's like, what YouTube channel is Dr. Markos on this week? All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in with us, and be looking for in the future. We're going to be getting a website together and other things too as this thing continues to expand and grow. So thank you. God bless you guys. Any closing thoughts, Dr. Markos?
Oh, I tell you, just if you go to my Amazon author page, Louis Markos, everything's there. And if you go to YouTube and type in Louis Markos, you'll see my YouTube channel and plenty of other things. It's really, really, really busy. And hang in there. My next book out is Dante. That'll be next year. So we're working on it.
What, next year sometime?
Oh, that's right.
Which
Actually, Dante's next year, but before that is a book that Bill and I will get together. It's called My Apologetics Dinner Party, and it's a book that is a unbroken Socratic dialogue that takes place during an international potluck Thanksgiving dinner I did at my house, talking with all people, including a Muslim, Christian, and Hindu student, as well, a Muslim, Christian, and Buddhist student as well.
which we don't, I don't want to belabor closing this podcast down, but man, that's one of the privileges of living in Houston, Texas, is we have what Dr. Markos calls a healthy diversity here. It's
Yeah.
you have people from all over the world that don't have an agenda. They just like to get around and
Yes.
talk. And sometimes you'll be at dinner with somebody. Well, just last
Yeah.
night we were having dinner with people from different faith backgrounds, from
Yeah.
Turkey, and sometimes Pakistan's there. And so it's just most diverse city in the United States. And so that's pretty cool that you wrote this dialogue. I want to hear
Yeah.
this because I think I was there. I might have been there whenever.
If you were there for that one was before I met you. Because
Oh,
the
that's
actual dialogue was like 7 or 8 years ago. It's before I met you, but I've added other things to it.
But we've
That's
had so
great.
many
Yeah.
many dinner parties like that at your house where it's like
Yeah, I
people
know.
from
International. It's because it's
all
who we
over.
are. There's no quotas. It's who we are. We love our diversity. We don't do
Yeah.
it to virtue signal. We just love
Yeah, we have a lot of fun, so it's really
Vive
cool.
la différence.
All right, well, guys, God bless you all. The next broadcast is actually going to be with Corey Miller this Monday, so do check that out. We'll be going live, and we'll be talking about he's critiquing the progressive movement within American universities, which is very apropos for today. He has a book coming out in the next couple of weeks, and we have several exciting interviews coming up. So you guys keep following the channel and be looking for a podcast too here soon. I've said it, now I have to go ahead and get that off the ground. So God bless you guys. We'll hope to see you again, like I said, this coming Monday at I think it's at 5 p.m. So
Monday,
follow
not
the
Wednesday.
channel.
Monday.
Yep. See you guys.